Hey guys, Chris here, and welcome to Rise of Humanity. For today's episode, I'm very glad to be joined by my guest, Brandie Chrisman. Brandie is a very passionate and dedicated spiritual worker and evidential medium who through her work brings together the departed with the living and has been doing so since 2008. Brandie also helps women to improve their lives and the lives of their families by helping them to connect to and incorporate their spiritual gifts into daily living. Brandie is thoroughly committed to her spiritual development and impact. So it's wonderful to have you on the show today, Brandie. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Awesome. So I'd love to just start by just delving into your current mission and the work you are doing today. 'Cause it seems kind of multifaceted in that you have the mediumship aspect and practice and that side of it, and then you're also helping women spiritually with their families as well. Does this all roll into one, and what does it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is multifaceted for sure. So the mediumship aspect, I find that most of my students are actually women, and they are women that have kind of stuffed who they are down, stuffed their spiritual gifts down. And during my 20s, everything was very, very focused towards the development of mediumship and the development of myself within mediumship and then teaching that. And I have found that as I have entered my 30s, it's about, holding on to the mediumship because that's my gift, I believe. But also teaching women to embrace their spiritual gifts no matter what they are, whether it's being an intuitive or a medium or something else, just being able to teach them how to tap into that confidence and how to tap into that intuition, which we all have, to help be the leader of their families, I think is important.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you provide training then to help people unlock those gifts and then start to incorporate them?
I do. Yeah, I do. I teach what we call a mediumship circle once a week.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of meditation and self-reflection and journaling and that sort of thing that as a mom, you sometimes, or even as a parent, sometimes you just don't have time to do unless you go somewhere else to do it, so.
Yeah. Oh, so is that kind of like an in-person weekly event then?
It is, yeah,
Oh,
locally. And I teach online as well.
awesome.
Okay.
Cool. So how could you talk about your spiritual gifts then and how they manifest for you?
Right. They first started manifesting when I was about 14. I would dream about people around me that passed. And being 14 and an adolescent, developing it was not a priority for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was 19 and I had lost a family friend that I hadn't seen in a number of years. He suddenly passed away. And I dreamt about him about 2 weeks after he had passed away. And that set me on fire, basically. I think I was picking up every book that had to do with mediumship or psychism that I could find. And I was a young mother, so, at the age of 21, I had my first child. And then after I had her, I went to my first intuitive workshop. And I, at the time, couldn't get enough. It was one of those things where I wanted to understand what I was going through so I could turn it off. It wasn't necessarily something I wanted to develop or use. And that started to change as I started to understand the impact that it could have, not only on my life, but, the lives of my clients. And that led me to numerous workshops and circles in other states, because at the time, Oklahoma wasn't on the upfront of anything that had to do with with mediumship.
Yeah.
But then that eventually brought me to Stansted there in England. For years, I would travel back and forth
Yeah.
to develop with the spiritualist communities there. So
Awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned there about how you didn't want to develop them, and you also mentioned that the work you do with women to help them, unlock these gifts that they've squashed down. I mean, what I've heard that a few times that people kind of resist because they're getting knowledge that makes them kind of uncomfortable, and they see things and they wish they could have stopped it or something. It seems like it kind of can be a common pattern initially to try and squash it down. Is that something you've seen?
Right, absolutely. And I think locally, I think that is because it's easier not to develop anything outside of the norm. And I'm sure that it's like that to an extent everywhere. But it does make you stand out a bit. And you either have to tame the ego to say, this is a part of me, or this is, this owns me. And what I want to teach people to do is say it's a part of me. And, it can coexist with my belief system and where I'm at.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a huge gift. I suppose you just have to see it in the right way. But how did it kind of transform? I mean, obviously, it's opened up whole new opportunities and being able to help other people. But how did it kind of transform your personal life, being able to kind of channel these spiritual gifts?
It's definitely put me out in the public more than I thought I'd ever be.
Yeah.
Which is okay. You learn to kind of go with the flow, but it has made me more aware as an individual. Obviously, as my mediumship development grows and expands, as does my personal development, and it has changed me in a lot of ways. But I think mostly just realizing that love is pretty much the foundation of everything we do. And we have to come from that place. We have to rise up and breathe through it and remember that we are beings of love.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's such a sort of cool aspect of, developing your intuition. Because I think when people first hear about it and they think of it as some kind of like, really crazy technical weird thing that you have to be like ultra skilled to do, but it's actually incredibly natural to humans, and it's really a part of just raising your own vibration and
Absolutely.
level of consciousness, really, isn't it? It's just it just comes from love.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So could you you have obviously you have this mediumship practice. Could you just explain because you use the term evidential medium, could you just explain what that means?
Right. So what that means is we as the medium, or myself as the medium, energetically blends with your loved one in a way that you can start to take on their persona. So you begin to feel their persona or the way that they passed. And eventually that opens up to an entire story of someone's life, which is then the evidence of what we bring through. So, if your father was a very good golf player, he's probably going to talk to me about his golf stories and the jokes around that, that you would know about. And that would be considered evidence, as opposed to just saying, your Nan is here with you and she loves you and trusts you. We have to build this foundation of trust between spirit, between the sitter and the medium. This three-way communication is built on trust, and I can't do that without evidence.
Yeah,
So.
I imagine that completely takes the whole client experience to a whole new level, really.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, do you provide then like private sessions? Do people, just come to you and say, "I want to connect with someone, that's gone"? How does it look?
Right. So typically someone would contact me via my website, and I would get their name and their contact information and set them up for a day that works for them. And then you would come in, and I would explain to you how I work, which is, I'm going to close my eyes for the first few moments. That's just to connect. And once I open up my eyes, it will move quickly and just answer with yes, no, or I don't know. And then I don't typically like to know who you want to connect with. I kind of like spirit to do their own thing. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the person that you've come to communicate with is the first person or the second person. through the spiritual door. So,
Yeah.
and we just have a conversation, really. It's a conversation about their life and their connection to the sitter and what they want to say regarding that connection.
And is it a lot about? I mean, the reason that people seek you out, is it kind of about closure and just kind of kind of letting go? Is that what it's about? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's closure is such a funny word, isn't it? I don't think a medium can ever fully bring like 100% closure, right? But I think that we can prove that that bond of love never goes away and it's always there to tap into. So it's not a fix for grief per se, but it does help you realize that that connection will always be there.
yeah. And so, I mean, you mentioned earlier about the weekly workshop that you do. Is that helping people to do what you are doing in your private sessions, or is it just general? I mean, just kind of just to unlock your intuition as a whole.
It's a little bit of both. I teach too, and I alternate weeks. And there's one called Into the Mystic, where we really look at the mysticism behind the intuitive self and even the mediumistic self. And we do a lot of self-reflection with that. But we always read someone somehow, whether it's intuitively or mediumistically, whether it's one-on-one or in front of like a group setting. Over here, we call them galleries, but I think in the UK it's called platform demonstrating. And so they always work in some capacity. And then there's the depths of mediumship, which is all about a higher connection with spirit in the trance format, which is not for everyone, but it is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So when people start to incorporate this, I mean, intuition. I mean, what does I suppose it's a sort of varying degrees of how strong your intuition is. But what does it look like to live intuitively? What kind of doors does it open that maybe you couldn't see before and weren't available to you before?
Right, that's a good question. I think it starts with, an intuitive life to me would be being very connected to yourself first. We like to kind of do this for other people, and there's this myth that we can't be intuitive for ourselves, but it's about that trust, So you learn to trust yourself, and by learning to trust yourself, it brings a lot more confidence into your decision making process and kind of just trusting the natural flow of life. So I have found that you will still have struggles. We are human, and we learn through those struggles, but they will not be as leveling, I think, for an individual once they embrace, the intuitive self, because we're all intuitive.
Yeah.
And doors that it has opened up. Gosh, I think I just appreciate life more, and I appreciate the connections that I have more. Mm-hmm. It's just made me a less neurotic person, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're connecting something much bigger than yourself, I suppose that would be the natural progression.
We would hope.
Pardon? Say that again.
I said we would hope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I suppose, having that ability to, tap into that intuition, it gives you more kind of maybe breathing room, more space when you're facing a life challenge, whereas instead of immediately getting caught up in the drama and everything, it gives you kind of more of a tool to be able to see clearly and move forward, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a difference between reacting and responding, and I think being connected to the intuitive self makes it so that you respond to things much more than you react to life, which those are two very different things that can have two very different impacts.
Yeah.
So.
And how does it, would you say for you, it enables you to see the bigger picture of your own life maybe and be more self-sufficient? Because like, I mean, like typically a lot of people invest in a coach, which is obviously it's definitely a good thing, and I would recommend that if you want to improve your life. But I suppose the more awakened you are, the more you are able to see your own patterns, because that's one of the biggest benefits of having a coach is they can see things that you can't. So I suppose when you develop your own intuition and awareness, you're able to, I suppose, become more self-sufficient.
Yes, yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm totally a believer that every therapist needs a therapist.
Yeah.
Probably needs a therapist or another medium. But for the most part, you navigate life in a way where you are no longer the victim, or your victim mentality isn't held on to as strongly. Because we are human, we have that ego that says you did this to me and this is your fault. And it has definitely helped me look inward and say, what was your part in this, and what could you have done differently? What of this do you need to own? So self-reflection is definitely, again, a big part of being intuitive and utilizing your intuition.
Yeah, and I suppose even if you can't figure the answer out for yourself, what the actual problem is, just having that awareness of being able to say, stop blaming on other people. That even if you can't figure the answer out yourself, it gives you that option to go and ask someone else who can help you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. um, so, and obviously you got the mediumship practice, and then could you just talk about the work that you do with helping women to incorporate their spiritual gifts into improving their daily lives and their families, and empowering women? What does that work look like?
It is a lot of listening. I find, even as a mom myself, that's the number one thing that women come. They just want somebody to listen to them, I think, sometimes. So after we've got that bit over with, we then move on to some of what we've already talked about, just that self-reflection. Meditation is a huge aspect of not only my personal daily practice, but what I would recommend to anyone. And having a regular schedule, whether that's 3 days a week or every day or whatever it is. But it's breaking down those walls, those lies that we've kind of made ourselves believe that we have to be, or have to constantly be doing, or that we have to be in an eternal place of sacrifice. And it kind of just empowers the work that I do with women. I would say, very empowering, of owning yourself and owning your choices and creating boundaries within your life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like how that would like manifest in your daily life. I mean, I suppose it would build stronger connections with your family and your loved ones, and maybe things like improve your routine, and just gain more
Yeah,
clarity, things like that.
yeah, and energetically. I mean, I think energetically, just having the energy, not having boundaries, and constantly sacrificing is very draining and very frazzling. And it's one of those things where, when I started doing these things for myself, uh, first, obviously, before you practice with others, you want to practice with yourself. But whenever I started doing these things, creating boundaries was huge. Creating that routine with my children and my partner to say, I know that I have been available at 100% of the time, but I need you to pack your own lunches today, or I need you to clean, or that sort of thing. Creating those boundaries gives you energy. And there's something that we call mommy guilt here, and I don't know if it's a universal term or not, but it's one of those things where it helps you let go of that mommy guilt, and it's not weighing you down, and you become more of you, the individual person, not just the mom or the partner or the sister, or the daughter. You become you, and that just infuses your life with energy. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you think this kind of, I mean, it's probably a pretty big, widespread problem. Do you think it's just expectation that of women what they are supposed to do in the household, and it just builds up to too much pressure and expectation, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I just had this conversation with somebody the other day where if you look at, even if you go back to as early as, the 1950s, we created this very definite portrait of what the family should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And without regard to the realism of it. And so instead of having, in American culture, it's mom stays home, you have 2.5 kids, you sacrifice the rest of your life, and you're happy about it. And don't get me wrong, having children and being a mother is beautiful, but not at the loss of yourself, because those children will grow up and they'll move away, and then you'll be left going, okay, who was I?
Yeah.
And it's. I think we just developed this unrealistic idea of what the family should look like, because you know what, men have these pressures too, and gender. I think it comes down to gender roles and unrealistic viewpoints, basically. So
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you mentioned there about when the children are gone, who am I? And I've heard of, women who've had that problem, or the children have gone off and flown the nest and they just feel completely lost. And I think for men, that parallel issue is when they put everything into just, making money and hustling and a career. And then when they get to retirement and it's over, they just feel completely lost and they have no real meaning. And it's like, what do I do now?
right. Like, I just sit here in this chair for the rest of my life. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, well, yeah. I think it's important to teach our children that the sense of self, no matter what role you have at any phase in your life, is what's important.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about the work that you're doing is it has a knock-on effect. It's not just the women that you're impacting, but it will also, impact future generations when they pass on that new kind of energy to the young ones, to the kids in their family.
Right, right. That's my hope. I don't think I've stopped to think about that, but that would be my hope.
Yeah, because I think a big part of, it's not the only way it's going to happen, but certainly improving, child rearing and, teaching children, really positive core values from a young age is really a big way to make an impact in the future of humanity, because when the next generation comes up with more positive values, it's just going to create a ripple effect and a better future over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, I'm going to botch the quote, but I think it was Mother Teresa who said, if you want to change the world, go home to your families. And, it couldn't be more true,
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, I think, you mentioned about the, women finding more meaning, and there's moving away from that that traditional kind of 1950s thing, a view of what a family should look like. And I think the way I see it anyway is that the masculine feminine balance of humanity is changing as we go forward. And I think as we go forward, I think you're going to see a lot more women moving away from that traditional view and stepping into their power more, and men moving away from that greed and hustle approach and becoming more balanced. And I think is that the way you see things, helping women to step into their power more?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's not I say things, and I think what's important is, to kind of side note is that men have value. And I know that sometimes, particularly in my area, when these types of conversations start, it becomes you're a feminist conversation. I'm like, yeah, I kind of am, but I'm not a man hater. So like, there's, those are two different things. But yeah, I do feel like women are going to step back up to holding an important role in the dynamic of humanity, and not just to nurture, but to be warriors and to fight for what is right and protect. And my hope is that, I think we're going to go through a period where we do have to fight for that.
Mm-hmm.
But then my hope is that it will be a natural way of life where things are a little easier for us as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the way I see things going, just more balance coming. So yeah, it's a good sign. So how do things look for you, like from routine and business standpoint and balancing family? Because it really sounds like that you are living your mission, and you are, you're passing on to everyone what things that you're actually really doing in your own life.
Yeah. So I like to throw the word balance out the door because, it's one of those things where, I don't know, balance is messy. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it is. It's just messy. And um, I just feel like this means enough to me that if I have to be up at 11:30 recording, at night recording lectures while the children are asleep, then that's what that looks like for me. And it's just for me, it's teaching people that you can't fit everything in a 9 to 5 format, particularly if you are a spiritual entrepreneur or a business, driven person. You create your own hours, and if that's 11:30 or midnight, then that's what that looks like. And so, yeah, I mean, you've got to go with the ebbs and flow of life, and have respect and honor where you're at. But I'm still learning as well, and I imagine I always will be.
Yeah. I mean, when did you make the transition into actually, starting your own business and your own practice? What did that look like?
So I would have been, let's see, I think I would have been 24 whenever I decided I was going to go out and professionally put myself out there. So that's when the website was created. And I made the mistake of letting someone else kind of create my brand. So I did some rebranding as I grew, but it's one of those things where I went from reading on, I don't know if you remember MySpace. I'm sure you do. Reading on MySpace, doing free readings, to the evolution of that was to read in a local shop for, I think it was $15 an hour. And then as I became more confident and my sessions held more accuracy, things began to change into more of a professional practice for me, which would have been probably, so I really started at 24 charging. It probably would have been at like 28, but I was completely confident in being a professional, putting myself out there as a professional. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, so it's a gradual process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
As it should be.
Yeah. So, how did you? For people who because you had a child was at quite a young age. Was it 19? You said.
Yeah, I got married when I was 19,
Okay.
and we had our first child when I was 21. Yeah.
So, you managed to build yourself a business, while having a child and all that, and a family and all that kind of stuff. What would you say to people to women who feel maybe that they're stuck and blocked because they have, they perceive that they have too much commitment otherwise, but you've managed to make it work. So what would you say to people who were wondering about that?
Yeah, I would cut the commitments that don't mean anything to you. I think that's the first thing that I did. You really have to prioritize. If you want something bad enough, it becomes a priority. And my mediumship became, for lack of better terminology, another child for me. And so I nurtured it, and I nurtured myself through it and with it. And, the mind is a powerful thing. And if we think that we can't do it, we won't. And you've got to change your mind and cut your commitments first, and focus on where you want to go with it. But you also can't force it. I think with mediumship or the intuition, it has its natural unfoldment. And so with as much work as I put in, I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky young ones that um, found out very early that I had this gift, and then it became a passion, which I know is not always the case. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the unfolding, because I think it's kind of just accepting what your gifts are at any one time, and just doing the best that you can to serve people with them, and then if you put in the work like you did and stick with it, eventually it'll all begin to unfold into a way that you can really add value to people's lives and make a living from it.
right, and it took a long time for me to be able to pay the bills with what I'm doing, and especially having gone through a divorce, in my mid 20s, that'll level you for sure. But I couldn't go any faster than I was going. I was unfolding rapidly, but um, I think something that should be considered as well is you never stop, you never reach the summit, and it's a lifelong thing. So you've got to be in it for the long haul, and realize that you will get better with each year that goes by. And so taking that pressure off of yourself is very important.
Yeah, I was just gonna. That word came to my mind, pressure as well. It's when you look at it, kind of, in the bigger picture, it's kind of an immediate relief. Like, oh, I don't have to rush. I can take a breath and just do the best that I can today.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not going to go any further than it's going to go.
Yeah,
So there's not a whole lot you can do to force your unfoldment. And I have found that when you do, your life becomes very messy and ungrounded. So
yeah. I suppose it's just accepting where you are and getting into. And when you do that, you kind of align with your circumstances. You get into more of a flow, and life just
yeah,
naturally begin to become more enjoyable.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what are your plans? I mean, do you have, obviously, you are allowing things to unfold as they do, but do you have like plans or visions for the future where you like to see things go, or are you just taking it like month by month?
I think I'm doing a bit of both. I think I would love to be midlife and have some sort of school for the intuitive arts, where people can come and not necessarily get certified, but just take classes and have good tutors and things like that. Much like the UK has. I think they have more than one now, but we need something like that here. And so that's a goal that I have, is to have a school. But I just want to do well. I just want to do well, and whatever that looks like. I'm appreciative of, and I'm grateful for. So
Yeah, and that would be really cool, because I think that obviously it's going to take time, but I think that kind of like the school thing would be good to kind of start building this intuition into more of a mainstream thing, rather than it being kind of esoteric and a bit out there.
right, right. I mean, and it's just such an innate part of everyone that I think it would do a great service to be able to teach that aspect. We teach hygiene, but we fail to find somewhere to learn other things that are important with intuitive arts. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that, because it's definitely something the world needs right now.
well, thank you.
So there's a question that I like to ask all my guests in my interviews, and that is, what would be your best advice on how people can contribute to the rise of humanity?
Oh, yeah, just come from a place of love and understanding. It's very simple, and we like to complicate it, I think. But um, just be love.
Yeah,
Be love, everyone. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Straight to the point. Awesome. So, could you share with the listeners where they can find out more about you or find you on social media or your website, things like that?
Yeah, so my website is brandiechristman.com. And I am on Facebook under that same name, Brandie Chrisman. And I'm on Instagram, where you can see lots of pictures of my life. And also Brandie Chrisman there. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Awesome.
And I have a class that's starting January 1st for anyone that might be interested. So
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll put the link to your website in the show notes as well, so people can, and your social media, so people can check that out. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for coming on and sharing the work you are doing and sharing a bit about your story and how you're contributing to the world. It's much appreciated. So thank you for coming on today, Brandie.
yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for having the show. I think it's pretty cool. So.
Cheers. Thank you. Appreciate that. So that is all for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and gotten some takeaways from what we've talked about and from Brandie's work and her story. I'm sure to stick the link to her website in the show notes so you can check that out as well. So thank you all so much for listening. I'll catch you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.